Good morning and welcome. This is Rotary's Virtual Coffee, May 11th of 2020. And the topic today is education, very specifically Lincoln Public Schools. And fortunately for us, we've got three experts to discuss the challenges that the schools are facing at this time. I'd first like to begin though and have Randy Bretz introduce our first speaker.
Well, actually our speaker is right here behind me, hiding in the links.
Flat Steve!
Years ago, I had a life-size cutout made of Steve Joel, and I ran around town and had a lot of fun with it. But I understand now, Mindy, you can tell us, I think Flat Steve is being scheduled to attend meetings. Anyway, you know, a good teacher is like a candle. I don't know if you can see my little candle burning here. It consumes itself and light the way for others. And Patsy Koch Johns' candle has been burning brightly for a long time, and it still is. She's taught in Nebraska for many years, Cozad, and most recently in our beloved Lincoln High School, as you can see behind me here. That's her room right there. She was in that room. But she's retired now, but her candle is still burning brightly. She serves on the Nebraska Board of Education. She's coached TEDx Lincoln speakers. She zips around the Nebraska Club during our Rotary meetings. And bless her heart, she calls my wife every night to encourage my wife during this time of health challenge. Well, Patsy wanted to burn her candle a little bit this morning to give a tribute to some teachers during National Teacher Appreciation Week. So Patsy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Randy.
Oh, you got it, great.
Yeah, I think I did, yeah. Okay, well, I'm reading my tribute because it was written to publish, and Randy asked me to do this, and so I said I would as long as I could read it. So here we go. A tribute to teachers during National Teacher Appreciation Week amid a pandemic. Over the past few months, I've become prouder and prouder of the teachers in our state. I've always known that teaching is an honorable profession, but never has it been more obvious as I have seen since COVID-19 stepped in and stole one of the most precious and valued attributes of being a teacher. Every single day, teachers have the opportunity to meet with your children face to face and do their very best to pass knowledge. None of us ever thought of ourselves as glorified babysitters, although that epithet passed through the lips of many who had not graced the hallways or classrooms of schools for many years. It was always a thrill for me to invite those who had not attended school since high school to make that journey with me to see what is actually happening in those hallowed places of learning. Just for a few minutes, I would be allowed to share the glorious efforts of the many teachers who have dedicated their lives to your children. Today, I would like you to take that journey again into what I see as happening in, quote, school, where that contact with students has transformed itself into a new school, with Nebraska teachers leading the way, not only in the desire to do a great job, but also unmatched creativity that educators hope will be used to make future education better than it was pre-COVID-19. Teachers went into high gear when Steve Joel, when they were asked or told that they would be teaching kids from their computers. Many of them worked diligently to create curriculum for what seemed impossible. I mean, how do you teach knot tying used in a theater class on a computer? Minds opened, curriculum grew out of collaboration and creativity. Music teachers sent home music for students to learn and rehearse and send back polished recorded performances of their accomplishments. It seems that the challenges were met and it was possible to grade or send feedback and evaluations of the processes that were happening. Yes, there is that missing space in communication when your teacher is using proxemics to emphasize what they are teaching you or to garner your undivided attention. But teachers worked on finding ways to fill some of that empty space as well. Teacher parades were created to connect students with their students on the streets of rural and urban communities, to let these students know that they miss them and they were still there for them, not just virtually, but for real. Who knew that Zoom and FaceTime could be used for first graders to read stories to each other and to be assured that their friends could still contact them? Packets were delivered and homework and graded papers and special surprise notes from teachers who really care. Those same platforms could be used creatively to take a tour of the Orpheum, the Sheldon, and the Nebraska State Capitol. Those same platforms could be used to create interactive activities to teach math and science and to discuss William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar and the relevance of the plot and that character to the world of today. The process is not anywhere near perfect. However, in the process, we have discovered remote learning has many inequities. Not all students have computers or internet access. Not all students have a safe, quiet place to use these devices. Ask any Nebraska teacher who is still struggling, dreaming of a better way to do it next year. They will tell you they want to do better for their students, to make these connections and to eliminate the inequities. Also know that there is absolutely no way to replace a specific connection in a classroom between a teacher and their students. This connection has been heralded and honored by quality teachers of history. Maybe your student has already identified a teacher they know who is great because they connect with them and because they're always searching for a better way in the middle of COVID-19 virus 2020. It is my honor as a former teacher, a parent of teachers, and a family of teachers, and a person who advocates for teachers to observe and respect what they are doing today, to observe and respect what many of them were asked to create in a week, and to have materials ready in a week, and to be able to present a week. And they are recreating that process every single day for their students, for our students here in Nebraska. My assignment for each of you today is to tell a teacher that you see their efforts and that you respect their endeavors. Give many of them an A+ for National Teacher Appreciation Week and for their valiant efforts and many successes during the COVID-19 virus. They deserve it.
Patsy, thank you. That was really wonderful. While you were talking, it just reminded me how teachers are like frontline responders. They're holding the precious lives of the kids, our future citizens of the city, in their hands. So they are very valued. And I love that you ask everybody to positively go out and thank a teacher that they see for their efforts, because it's been a valiant effort for sure. I also want to do a little, before I told Steve at the beginning of the, as we were signing in, that he could easily take up the whole hour, but I wanted to get these two little vignettes in first. And I wanted everybody in the club to meet Mindy Burbach, who is the new Mary Kay Roth. Well, 15 years ago, we started the dictionary project where Rotarians go out into the classrooms and give every fourth grader in Lincoln a student dictionary, which not only has words in it, but has the constellations, all the presidents, the Constitution. I mean, just so many, it's chock full of so many things. The students really love it. So I'm sure that might look different coming this fall. So Jeff Hebb is actually the chair of that committee. And I started the program back in 2006. So I will be coming with him to meet you. I think you suggested we get together with you in June, see what the landscape looks like. And we might have to make some adjustments for the September delivery, but we're willing to do that. But tell me today, so that people can hear a little bit from you, what do you like most about your job?
Well, I think it's easy to say that we at Lincoln Public Schools have the most amazing staff and students, and they make my job so easy. Communicating to the community is made easier because we work with such great professionals who truly care about the children and the students and the community of Lincoln. So I enjoy working with all the people I work with. That's what I enjoy the most. I was very fortunate that I got to work with Mary Kay for 4 years before she decided to retire. And I got to learn from the best, as you all know. She is just absolutely special. And so it was an honor to be able to follow in her footsteps. And I still lean on her from time to time. We've had a couple of phone calls these last couple of weeks, but it's just great to have somebody like Mary Kay in your corner. And, you know, when I started on October 1st, I was afraid my biggest challenge was the bond issue. And I'm sure you guys are thinking, oh yeah, we had that bond issue. So nobody would have thought that this would be a challenge that I would face in my first year. But I think that the school district is doing some amazing work, and I'm happy and proud to be a part of that.
Thank you, Mindy. So great to see you. We look forward to working with you and continue to do well in that job. We cannot imagine the challenge that has been facing most major businesses, least of all, you know, Lincoln Public Schools has had not only to transition teachers, but students and then the admin people as well. I can't imagine the challenge and the adjustments that LPS has had to make. But luckily, we've got the top gun here with us today. Steve's going to give us an up-to-date account of what's going on and maybe what we can look forward to in the future. Steve, welcome.
Thanks, Sharon. Appreciate it very much. And thank you to all Rotarians for all you do to support quality of life, public education, private education, all those things that go into making a community so wonderful. I mean, you're on the front line of providing support so that we can all get our job done. I have to just tell you that it was pretty clear to me that Mary Kay saw this pandemic coming. Having gone through the recovery from the fire, purple penguins, a bond issue, a whole bunch of other things, she just couldn't do one more. And she handed it off to poor Mindy Burbach, whose timing was horrible in terms of taking over. But, you know, both of them are high quality folks, just like everybody in LPS is as well. So very, very fortunate to work with the kind of people that I get to work with every day. And then Patsy, I have to tell you that was a very, very warming tribute to a profession that you hold so dearly to your heart. And not only was Patsy a great, great teacher and a colleague to many, she also has transitioned to the State Board of Education, where she continues to advocate for high quality education and high quality professional educators in classrooms. So thanks for all that you're doing. And certainly the Department of Education right now is providing guidance for us. And I you know, like everybody else, wish that, you know, there were answers that were just black and white, so we could just say, yep, that's it, got it, we're going to go. But as Matt Larson reminds me almost every week, we're in a pandemic. And when you're in a pandemic, it basically means there's a lot of uncertainty regarding, one, what we're experiencing, and two, you know, what does the future hold? And every day we get more information, right? And unfortunately, the information today is that cases in Lincoln are growing almost exponentially, and we're in a surge. And until we get out of the surge, we're you know, there's just a lot of risk out there in our various community, and we're dealing with the surge while we're trying to also, as a state, reopen industry and commerce. And you know, that worries me, and it worries a lot of our folks as well too. I made the comment early on publicly that teachers were on the front line of defense against the pandemic, because the last thing that we could afford to have happen, and I don't want to minimize our healthcare workers. I mean, they are truly in the trenches fighting the great fight. But second to them is the fact that education has to go on, and that we just can't take 3 months off. And as Patsy so eloquently said in her tribute, you know, the kids that are being compromised the most are the ones that have the least available to them in terms of resources and support. And we've been working day and night trying to connect with those children and those families. Unfortunately, we have a community that has been just so helpful. And I remember when we made the decision to send to be able to send laptops home with upper elementary students, and Kirk Langer, many of you know, just a tremendous CTO for us, immediately came into my office and he said, "We don't have computer bags. There's just no way. We can't send computers home." And we were getting ready to shut school down within 24, 48 hours. And so we contacted several community groups, the chamber being the first, because I happened to be speaking to the chamber board that morning. And I said, we need about 10,000 computer bags. We have 10,000 computer bags in 72 hours. And it hasn't stopped since then. I mean, if we put out a call to the community, we get all kinds of support. And again, the Rotary's on the front line of that, because I look around our community and I think of all the things that you've done to help promote education, not only at an individual school level, but projects like the Dictionary Project and things of that sort. So thank you. So we felt like while we had to make the decision to close school, and we were one of the early closures, as you may remember, and we kind of had to do it against some political advice that suggested otherwise, because once schools close, communities go into lockdown and shutdown. And it's pretty obvious that when workers have to take care of their children, which is their primary concern, it makes it very, very difficult for people in offices and in manufacturing plants or anywhere to be successful. But we also knew through some of the folks in the medical community, we have a doctor on our board, Dr. Bob Browner, who's done, I think, 14 or 15 community virus updates, which have been very, very helpful. He convinced me without trying to bully pulpit it, that schools were going to be vectors for the virus, and that keeping schools open was going to do nothing to help abate the spread of the coronavirus. So we made that decision to close, and when we made the decision to close, it literally turned the lights off and turned the switch. And that became a real challenge for us, because as much as we take great pride in the fact that we've invested heavily, not only in hardware and software, digital resources for kids, and training for teachers. There is no substitute for being able to do it in the classroom in terms of like a blended approach to learning, and then having to rely on it almost solely. And we knew that going in, that was, our gaps were going to be exposed fairly quickly, and which is why we waited a full 2 weeks before we implemented what we now consider to be pretty robust and remote learning that's gone a lot better. Patsy was talking about teachers. I have to tell you that shortly after we were involved in this conversion to remote, I brought up with Mindy's help a group that Mary Kay and I actually started, Teacher Advisory Council. We had about 60 teachers from around the city representing each school that logged on, and we had this just incredible conversation about, so what's it like? Tell us your stories, and we got some tremendous stories, most of which were captured in Patsy's tribute. But I'll never forget one, and Mindy, you'll remember this. This was a teacher that had made the decision to retire back in December and was planning to retire. And I can't remember, I think it was middle school or high school, and she was on the Teacher Advisory Council, and she admitted that she had done almost everything in her power to avoid converting to using too much technology, when she believed, like Patsy and I and Mary Kay, when we all came into this profession, we believed face-to-face, there's no substitute for face-to-face in the classroom instruction. And this young lady who just blew me away, and I won't forget it, and I'll blog it at some point. She basically said in March, when we went to pandemic remote planning, even though she only had another 2 months left in her entire teaching career, she learned how to teach remotely. And she said it was the hardest thing she ever had to do. And I was thinking to myself, and I may have even asked the question, then why in the world did you do it? I mean, there's other things you could have done. In 2 months, you're learning a whole new skill. And she said, it's my responsibility. It's what I do. It's what I signed on to do. Those are the kinds of stories that I believe are occurring every single day and will emerge as we go forward in even greater force. So, thank you to all of our teachers that have made the conversion. And I will tell you that the single most, the predominant point that was made by those 60 teachers is they want to reach every single one of their children, and they can't. And they can't because we learned early on as we were communicating with families that families, again, probably in poverty or in crisis, families basically said, we have to survive life. School is a much lower priority. So there were some statistics released last week, and through the weekend that basically showed our engagement rates. And while they've gone up very, very, I think very dramatically, we're pretty proud of that. We still have about 15 or 18% of our kids that, we've not been able to locate. We're struggling to find. We have hotspots that we've given out, I think 500 hotspots to families so that they can log on to the work that we're doing. And, it's still one of those things where, these children are not being supported, even though I think our service agencies, our schools, Rotary clubs, and other groups have done everything they can to do that. So there's definitely, the gaps are going to be exacerbated during a pandemic. It's going to be a constant struggle when you go to independent learning, and even though it is facilitated by teachers that are conducting Zoom classrooms or Google Hangouts or providing lessons, the reality of it is the kids in poverty are going to struggle the most. And that's going to be our challenge when we come back in the fall, because we're going to be facing some pretty significant gaps. And, we know that, and we're going to be geared up for it once we get going. I will tell you that I'm still holding out hope that, we will have school in some kind of a semblance of normal. But as every day goes by, and there's another statistic out there, it just becomes, tougher and tougher for us to envision. How do you do school when you've got all these restrictions? If we're limited to certain numbers of students per square foot or per classroom, and we're just not quite sure how we're going to be able to pull that off. I was reading a Washington Post article a couple of weeks ago that basically said, schools will have 15 students max in a classroom. That will be problematic for us, of course. There won't be any gym classes. There won't be any community cafeterias or school cafeterias, So, a return to normalcy that so many people, I think, are hoping for and praying for is really going to be a tough thing to define. But, we're going to continue to work on that. And I think that goes back to the guidance that we'll be getting from the governor and from the mayor and from Commissioner Matt Bloomstead in terms of, what is the best way to do that. And we're beginning to plan for several different scenarios, even though we don't want to commit too much time and resource to any one of them because we just don't know. Graduation is still scheduled for July 26th. It's a physical graduation at Pinnacle and at Devaney. But I can tell you that I think that that's becoming tougher and tougher for us to envision, unless there are some dramatic breakthroughs between, say, now and the first part of July. And we don't anticipate that that's going to be the case. We think that, restrictions based on everything that we're hearing, particularly from the medical community, are until we get a vaccine, things are just not going to return to normal. I think that a lot of our political folks across the country are putting a lot of hope into some kind of a treatment or an antidote that would shorten the virus impact. That would certainly be a big step in the right direction and provide a little bit more clarity, I think, for us as we go forward in terms of how we bring groups together. But as we've told our board, when you think about school opening in the fall, think about the teachers that have compromised health conditions. Think about the teachers that are 60 and older. I think we've got almost 22%. And that number, I don't want to be held to, but we did a quick scan early on. How many of our or the people who work for us are over the age of 60, and I want to say that number is 20% or above, that are going to be very reluctant to come back into a public setting, even if we're wearing masks and even if we're practicing social distancing and, you know, washing our hands multiple times a day. And how do you staff around that, right? What about school buses? So there's just lots of questions that are going to be, you know, we're going to be mulling as the days go through. Our highest priority right now is one, connecting with families that we've just lost track of, and I think every day we're picking up more and more of those connections. Closing school out. We announced a plan last week that is not very popular in the community, and that is that, you know, during those transition years, which is 5th grade, 8th grade, and of course seniors, we're allowing them to come up and get their stuff because they have to move on to another school. We're also going to be working with any parent and student that's going to be transferring schools, but there isn't any way that we can just accommodate 42,000 students given restrictions that we have with social restrictions that we have. So we're going to be doing things on a specialized basis. Teachers haven't been able to get up to school to retrieve their belongings as well, and, you know, we're trying to work on a plan for that. So school closure, ending the semester, which, you know, I think is pretty much under wraps. High school is going to be secondary is going to be done May 15th this week, and then elementary will go to, I think, May 21st or 22nd next week. And then we're planning a virtual synchronous summer school, which is going to be different than what we're doing right now with remote learning, because those students will actually log on, attendance will be taken, grades will be formulated and calculated, and students will have assignments that will be graded. And then we'll get into June, and it will be June 1 is the deadline that our team has given ourselves to really start planning in earnest for what that reopening might look like. And again, I think that the guidance that we get from the commissioner, the governor, and the mayor is going to go a long way toward helping us understand, you know, what it might look like when we get there. And I can tell you that, you know, short of opening school for 42,000 students, just like we always have, which appears to be more and more unlikely, this is going to continue to be second order change for a lot of people, particularly if, you know, it involves students not going to school all day or not going to school every day. I will tell you at LPSDO, we've got, if you were to drive up to our building today, you would probably see less than 10 cars out of 300 people who typically work there. And we're starting to talk about what might transitioning back to work look like. And as you know, as I've already mentioned, I think we'll be looking at alternative scheduling. We've proven that for the most part, we can work from home effectively. It isn't fun. I don't like it. I'm of that generation that needs to be around people. And as much as we practice Zoom and we've become proficient at it and we're able to get our work done, it still isn't the same as being able to have a casual conversation with somebody or to pop into a meeting kind of unannounced. But we've proven we could do it. And so I think one of the solutions that we'll be looking at probably June 1 is how do we provide opportunities to social distance in an LPSDO with, and also, you know, honor people's concerns about their underlying conditions, and yet be able to get the work done that we're going to have to get done to open up school. So those are just real challenges ahead of us. But, you know, as you've heard before, and I'll reiterate, we just have great people on our teams, and we have great people working with our kids. We have great leaders in our buildings. We have nurses that are helping out with contact tracing right now. They've helped out at North Star with the drive-through testing. We've got our bus drivers that, you know, are when we need them, they're helping out with maintenance projects. We're paying virtually everybody until, you know, we can't anymore. And, you know, we think that this is with this year's budget. We're working on a budget for next year that is going to be challenging for us in a lot of ways. We lost $17 million going into this year without the pandemic, and that was just based on school finance fluctuations. A lot of it has to do, we're not growing 800 students anymore. We're growing 250 students. And so we made some significant adjustments to staffing. Nobody lost a job, but people had different assignments in different locations. For example, district-wide coaches are been returned to the classroom as one. Next year, you know, we're scheduled to lose at 7 million before the pandemic, and then of course the biggest challenge for us right now is what's going to be the financial impact of the pandemic. If sales taxes and income taxes, as we all know, are going to be greatly diminished, how does that, what position does that put the state in terms of being able to meet their state aid allocations? And then one of our concerns and worries is, you know, what about property taxes? Second half are due on August 1, and you know, I think we're nervous in terms of whether or not people are going to be able to do that, given the financial restrictions that they're enduring. So we have some major financial challenges ahead of us, but again, we have a great team of people. Board of Education's been fantastic. They granted me as superintendent emergency powers, and you know, I think that's based on just a lot of trust that we have with each other. And you know, they continue to be incredibly supportive, and you know, but we're gonna have to craft a budget in the next month or so, 2 months or so, that's really going to reflect kind of this new normal. So I'll stop there. I know you have a bunch of questions. I like, as Sharon said, I could talk for a long time and a lot more to cover, but let's let me try to respond to some things.
Steve, I don't know if you have your chat window open.
I do.
Okay, Regina Worm is one of our members. She's currently living in Berlin.
Oh, wow.
And she's got a question there that maybe you can scan through, but I think the gist of it is she's wondering what kind of feedback you're getting from other education leaders who are concerned about the schools, especially in Grand Island and Crete, with the large Title I populations. I suppose you're maybe not going to have different protocols for the Title I schools versus, when I hear you say, oh my gosh, we have to think about having less people in the classrooms, and one thought that came to my mind was, okay, the people that can learn online, that aren't as challenged, maybe those people can continue to learn from home, but then the others can come to school. But I think Regina's question is, what conversations have you had about people trying to target those populations?
Yeah, you know, as many of you know, in Grand Island in 2006, we went through a really tough immigration raid that was very, very difficult. And I've been called on a number of times to speak with superintendents and community leaders. And this is a challenge unlike any other, because with the packing plants being required to be open, being mandated to be open, and parents needing to be there at the risk of perhaps losing their jobs or, you know, not being able to be compensated, you know, it puts kids and families at great risk. You know, the explosion in Grand Island that was centered on the packing plant didn't surprise me at all. But by the same token, you know, they're having to deal with the fallout of that. And I know the superintendent in Grand Island and actually the mayor, who is the school attorney that I hired when I was there, have really tried to reach out to the federal government and state government to try to ask for some relief and some support. But there's two sides to that battle. So I think it's really about, you know, what can schools and communities do to support these families that have to go to work every day under kind of a gubernatorial order. So Regina, I would say I don't really know that I've been able to provide a whole lot of help with them. They're caught in that conundrum between, you know, the food supply chain being a requirement that, you know, is being ordered to be held open, and the social impact of putting people in close quarters where the virus is right now just spreading pretty significantly.
Dr. Joel, Natalie Hahn is one of our members, and she fortunately was able to move from New York City to Lincoln just before the pandemic hit. So I'm sure she's glad to be here. But she was wondering how you've handled the school feeding program during the pandemic.
Well, really, really proud of that. We clicked over 55,000 meals last Monday, and I think we're going to continue to increase. And that's a tribute to Edith Zumwalt and Liz Standish, that whole team on the business side. I have to tell you, last Monday, even though it was raining, I made it out to about 3 sites, And my heart was so warmed. You know, the line of cars that are waiting to get their meals for the week was really quite impressive. The folks that were out there braving the elements with smiles on their face, letting people know that, you know, we're happy to help was just fantastic. So our free and/or reduced kids are being, I think, well provided for with those meals. And of course, you know, the backpack program is under Scott Young, as well as some of the other social agencies are doing a great job as well. You know, I think, again, I don't know that Lincoln does it any better than, I think Lincoln does it better than almost any other city in the country when it comes to providing those kind of supports for children that need it.
Steve, Randy Bretz wants you to talk just a little bit more about distance learning. You had mentioned the synchronous learning, which is somewhat like this, where you can actually see people and you're taking attendance. And then also, I think he mentioned that the teacher can give an assignment and the student would work individually. So are there several types of distance learning that can be employed?
Yeah, there you know, several different types. And many of you will remember when distance learning first came out, it was a teacher in a lab or a classroom that delivered a lesson, and that lesson was statewide. And anybody that was in that class then would respond via assignments. And the interaction part of that was always a technology that had to be worked on. Zoom and Google and, you know, Microsoft teaming and, you know, all of those things that, you know, that right now are involved in this kind of interaction has really made it a lot better. Teachers now through Zoom are putting lessons, they can share their lessons and they can get feedback from students. We're seeing a lot more of that at the high school level. At the elementary level, I think it's just a little bit more, you know, teachers connecting with kids and making sure that, you know, that the lessons are being understood. So remote, when we talk about synchronous, we're talking about an actual class where teachers are seeing students face, just like this, it's Zoom. And they can call on students and students can ask questions. And, you know, sometimes we see parents lingering in the background and, you know, particularly if it's a math lesson, because so many of the parents right now, even if they're accountants and engineers, are struggling with second grade math mightily. And so there's a lot of questions that come up. So that's really the big difference, but there's a lot of different delivery methods. I will tell you, we just, kindergarten through second grade has been our weakest point. And a lot of it is because we're doing, for the most part, just lesson presentation and really haven't, because the K through 2 students just haven't been, we just didn't have a good system in place for K1 through 2. And we're working on that this summer in the event that we have to do another pandemic shutdown because of a resurge in fall.
Steve, we have another question from Eric Drumheller, who's our vice president. He'll be taking over as president next year. And he's thinking ahead to how will visitors to buildings be handled. That would relate to teammates, but also our dictionary project. I'm sure that things are going to be in somewhat of a state of flux until the fall. And I think we can make the adjustments necessary, but right now, what do you see as the future?
Well, I think that, you know, again, until we have a treatment and or a vaccination, we're going to have to be very, very careful about outsiders coming in. They'll have to be, I would guess right now, they'll have to be masked and they'll be contained to a certain location. And we'll make sure that that location is, for the most part, you know, very, very sanitized location. We still have to work on that. You know, we're going to need some guidance because, you know, schools that are closed to others just are never very welcoming. And as Eric mentioned, you know, things like the dictionary project, things like all of our community volunteers that we've historically had, think about teammates, you know, programs like that are all, we're just going to have to think about what's the safest way to be able to portray those opportunities, and we'll come up with something. And, you know, I think that, you know, again, we're going to be looking for guidance on that.
Steve, Randy Bretz is also asking, what's been your main challenge? And then is there anything that you can think of that our club could help you with?
Yeah, thank you. The main challenge has been that 14-15% of the kids that, you know, have pretty much checked out, and the ones that didn't need the grades. And there was a large number of high school students when they were given the option of, you can take your third quarter grade and and take that for your fourth quarter grade to get full credit. They opted to do that. So we're not concerned about them. They're going to come back to school ready to go. But it's really those students that that don't have access, that are living in turmoil. And I was reading Chief Blymeister's report today about mental health, the numbers of mental health cases that they're dealing with. I mean, just, you know, imagine how many kids are being exposed to that. So that's our struggle. Our social workers, guidance counselors, and a lot of our teachers are trying to make those connections. So I don't really know how I could put out a call to Rotary here, other than to say that stand by. I think really it's, we've got plenty of people that are not working full time, that when we call, they're taking on these challenges. So we don't really need a lot of community volunteers right now. But I think certainly any support that could be given to the food bank, that could be given to the other agencies that are trying to help families get through this crisis.
Do you anticipate that you might even take temperature of students and teachers as they come into buildings in the fall?
Yes, we're researching right now, what do those I don't know, industrial thermometers look like, and whether or not that's viable for us. I mean, is that something we should be doing? But yeah, those are all conversations that we're having. Wearing those latex throwaway gloves, those plastic gloves, I think is something that we might be looking at as well too.
There was an article in the paper I thought I read about the students that tend to fall behind during the summertime anyway. Will those students be encouraged to do some sort of summer school?
Yeah, and we have to limit summer school this year to about 1,500 students. So that's just because we've determined that's going to be in our ability to do as good a job as possible. But yeah, those students will be encouraged. But the ones that I'm talking about are the ones that we just have struggled with in terms of making any connection. And I think when they come back to school next fall, we're going to have some remediation plans in place that are going to be designed to catch them up pretty quickly. And we're going to see a lot of those children, particularly in our immigrant communities as well as in our high poverty areas.
Steve, Natalie Hahn's saying that her Malika Foundation had given some books to Clinton schools. If you hear of any school that especially needs books, that could be something that Rotary could help with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. We'll put out something to, Mindy's taking notes for me, I'm sure. So we'll make sure that we notify our principals that in fact you put that on the table. Thank you.
And then also we are especially close to Everett, has become, as Roger Ludeman likes to say, the soul of our club. And we've done many things with Everett, hands-on things, and also helping to improve their playground, et cetera. So anything with Everett, especially if they need Wi-Fi, whatever, we stand ready to help with that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else out there have questions for Dr. Joel? He's got all the answers, so just pose a question for him. Well, of course, I've muted everybody. Maybe that's why there aren't any questions. If you're going to ask a question.
Dr. Joel, did the fire at the district office in any way prepare you slightly for this catastrophe?
Thanks, Terry. That's a great question. Here's kind of, I've been doing this, my 33rd year as a superintendent. So I've had a plethora of experiences. And I would say this, going through the raid, going through bond issues, being involved in controversial community decisions and conversations, and, Purple Penguins, if you remember that one, Mary Kay remembers that pretty well. One of the things that I've learned is that, we always have to be prepared, right? There can't be panic. We can't ever surrender to conditions and just say, you know what, that's it. Life as we know is over. And, one of the things I always find is that when the chips are down, the gamers, the people who come to work the very next day and say, okay, this is harder than anything I ever imagined, but we're going to get through it. I think when with that kind of an attitude, we will get through it. We'll get through this pandemic, and we'll be a stronger school system on the other side of this. But to a lot of people right now, it doesn't feel that way. It feels like, wow, there's a lot of hopelessness baked in. There's just the political cross currents are in a lot of ways brutal. And, you know, I've always learned that my biggest job is to be a kind of a merchant of hope for people. And so that's what the fire taught me. I mean, I'll never forget that day. I mean, it was 1 o'clock in the morning when Mark Shepard, who was the associate superintendent for business, said, "You need to come down to the district office. We have a little issue concerning a fire." And, you know,
issue.
yeah, and I'd only been on the job for a year, so I lost all those Rotary awards that you get, you know, that for being the president, and, you know, all those nice little trinkets. And sadly, they all burned up. But there were people in that building that lost 30 years worth of memories. And I remember, and Mary Kay does too, because we set up a triage down at the operations plant, how the hardest thing was to just say to people, we have to fight through this. We're going to get through this. And we'll, you know, we don't know what it looks like now. We don't know what the end of this pandemic looks like. We don't know what school's going to look like in the fall. But we have the people to put together a plan that will be as good as any in the country. And we'll all be proud of the fact that when we have our reunions, we'll be able to say, you know, I was part of the pandemic recovery. And that'll be something that, you know, we'll be able to take with us forever. Just like, you know, one of the messages we're going to give seniors, I'll give seniors, is sorry about what you're experiencing and your great loss, but you will always remember that you were the class, the pandemic class, and what you did as a result of the losses that you incurred is going to define you for the rest of your life. And that's the approach we always try to take.
Dr. Joel, Lisa Lee is asking if LPS has a cash reserve, and if you have a priority list of how you will spend that, should there be a shortfall in government support?
Right. So yeah, we do have a very healthy cash reserve. If you recall, in previous budgets, we had groups that wanted us to not have the healthy cash reserve. We're very, very grateful that we do. And so this year we're planning on using 7 million of that. And then next year, probably another 3 or 4 million. And if we have to use some more, we will. But, you know, cash reserve is like anything else. Once you use it, it's gone until you can replenish it. And it takes good times to be able to do that. Priority list of cuts. Yeah, I would say this, you know, we don't want to cut programs, and we don't want to cut people. And, you know, we've gone into all of our budget adjustments with that. We've looked at every department. Every department has offered up a 3% cut. We've eliminated all non-essential travel for next year. And then we're starting to look at low incident programs where perhaps we can do some combining. But, you know, one of the things that we have facing us is in 2021, we're going to be opening up a new high school for about 700 students, northwest part of the city, and an elementary school in the northwest part of the northeast part of the city that fortunately the state, thank you, Patsy, provides funding for school startups, which give us the opportunity to do that. We're looking at class size, of course. You know, we've tried to, I will tell you that LPS has one of the smallest class size ratios of an urban school district in America. We're very, very proud of that. That's an area where quite a few dollars can be recaptured with only maybe one more student on average per class. So we're going to be looking at a lot of different things going forward, but, you know, we're not going to lay off people, and we're not going to reduce large programs, but we're also not going to be innovatively spending funds on strategies that we're not going to be able to sustain over time. So we're taking a hard look at grants right now in terms of, you know, if there's a 3-year grant out there that at the end of 3 years, you know, or a 1-year grant that we have to match, you know, we're probably going to say no to that. And yes, I see the question on stimulus. We're anticipating about $7 million of stimulus monies once those are made available. And we're doing a lot of spending right now on stimulus, right? So things like masks, we're having to purchase masks, and you know, there's just a lot. Yeah, we've started to run that list. We've got a spreadsheet going right now of what are those dollars that we can use and get stimulus money for.
I think even of cleaning schools. I mean, where do you begin with all the hard surfaces?
Right. I mean, that's, how tough is that going to be? And if we have to deep clean schools every night, that'll be a major, major cost for us, right? In terms of supplies and also manpower. So yeah, stimulus funds will be very, very helpful for us.
Steve,
Pat's here. Oh, go ahead.
No.
Sorry. Two questions. Having homeschooled a few years, being a former teacher, but I know the University of Nebraska has had one of the primary homeschool support systems in the world. Have you had any connection with them? And also, I know that Alaska actually paid people to homeschool, maybe because of distances. Is that an option, that people would actually have some sort of support to keep their kids home?
You know, I think that's you pose a couple of really good questions. One of the thoughts that been twirling around in my mind is how many of our parents that are homeschooling right now, because they have to, how many of them are taking a liking to it and have the ability to do that going forward. So I think while we've not had formal conversation with the Homeschool Network, we do a lot of crossover work with homeschool parents. And I will tell you that probably going forward, that conversation is going to be more and more pertinent to what the ultimate solution looks like. If you believe that this pandemic has caused substantive social change in the way we act and behave, with school being a part of that, then I think it stands to reason that we'll be coming up with some solutions along the lines of what you just proffered.
Steve, I remember during the fire, this may or may not have been true, but you had said to the firemen, I've left my strategic plan on my desk. Could you please go in and there it is right there on the desk, if you could bring that out. And the guy was trying to tell you everything was disintegrated. Everything was burned to smithereens. You were like, no, on my desk, strategic plan. It's right there. You can get it. I'm sure you can.
We worked all year on it. And I said to him, the fire hasn't crossed the main hallway yet. And after he told me no, I went and grabbed Wieskamp and I said, how'd you like a big pay raise next year? All you have to do is go in and it was all done tongue in cheek. But the reality of it is, yeah, we lost everything. You know,
how does this affect strategic planning, this pandemic? Of course, it has yet to play out, but you know, how often will people have to strategically plan, you know, every year change the plan or whatever?
Oh, that's true. The pandemic's definitely going to change that.
Yeah.
Great questions.
Thank you, everybody, so much for coming to hear about all the challenges. Of course, the future of our community is in your hand, we believe at LPS, because you are educating the future citizens of our community, and we couldn't be prouder of the work that you guys are doing. We rely on you every day to continue to make Lincoln strong. So anything that we can do as a community or as a club to help you further in what you're doing, that just let us know. And Steve's an honorary member of our club, so he can get the word to us, and we are going to be there at the fore. But we'll continue to work with people like Mindy and try to strategically work on things to help make your job a little bit lighter, make the load a little bit lighter. But thank you so much. Thank you to everybody that came today, and thank you very much to Steve and Mindy and Patsy for her lovely reading. We really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep, bye-bye.